Very interesting topic today, and that is on opioid crisis, the lessons learned. We all know that opioid medications are dangerous in the way that though they are very effective for treating pain, they can be dangerous in the long duration of a patient care. And the opioid epidemic, also referred to as opioid crisis, now is the rapid increase in the overuse, misuse, abuse, and the overdose deaths attributed either in the part or in the whole of the class of the drugs, opioids since 1990s. So today we have a renowned faculties, Dr. Rajgopal sir and Dr. Bhageshri madam for the talk on this subject, and a renowned chairperson for today's program, Dr. Raghu Tota sir. I request our president, Dr. Kiran madam, to have a welcome address and proceed. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Kiran.
Thank you, Sarita. Honorable guest speaker, Padma Shri Dr. Rajgopal sir, respected Vice President of ISA National, Dr. Anjali Bhure madam, esteemed Chairperson, Dr. Raghu Tota sir, guest speaker from USA, Dr. Bhageshri Barlinge, Secretary, Dr. Sarita, all respected seniors who have joined online, teachers, and my dear friends. Greetings from ISA Nagpur, and a warm welcome to this webinar on opioid crisis and lessons learned. It is indeed such an honor and a proud privilege that Dr. Rajgopal sir has accepted our invitation and has graced the occasion. We are so lucky to listen to him, to his deliberations, and we will, of course, gain a little bit of experience out of that, hopefully. At the same time, we are humbled by the presence of Chairperson Dr. Raghu Tota sir. We are honored to have Dr. Bhageshri Barlinge, who will be enlightening us on the opioid crisis which has happened or which is still happening in US. On behalf of ISA Nagpur City Branch, I extend a warm welcome to all the esteemed dignitaries who have joined online. And I am sure we all will be enlightened by today's webinar. My welcome address is over. I take this opportunity now to introduce Dr. Raghu Tota sir. Although he needs no introduction, but a formality. He is the professor of palliative medicine presently at Department of Palliative Medicine, Tata Memorial Center, Homi Bhabha National Institute, Mumbai. He has done his fellowship in pain from Singapore. He is the corresponding author of the first Indian Cancer Pain Management Guideline. He is on the editorial board of Pain Physician Journal. He has received Navratna Award and also the Guinness World Record Certificate. He has more than 50 publications in the peer-reviewed journals. So welcome, Dr. Tota sir.
Wow.
Thank you.
Very impressive.
Thank you very much for a kind introduction, and I extend my warm, I can say, dhanyawad and thank you to ISA Nagpur City Branch. Yes, this is indeed a very hot topic, opioids, due to the fact of the two extremes. Okay, so now the one extreme is that opioids are not used. The other extremes are opioids are extensively used. So the pendulum has swung both ways, okay, based on the availability, and coming to the fact that the pendulum has swung towards the opioid extreme use has led to the opioid crisis. So, and then all of a sudden, literature has been bombarded about the misuse of the opioids and opioids causing a lot of things in the form of side effects, and the long-term use causing immunosuppressions. And although they're all literature based, and I work in a cancer setup, I have rarely seen all these things. Maybe Dr. Bhagyashri may enlighten us about all these things. Coming to the fact about the other part of the swing, I can say, is the availability of the opioids. So we being a developing country, we're in a developed thing, but we are still in a developing phase. Our country is in a developing phase. So opioid availability is in itself a biggest challenge. And I can say that Padma Shri Dr. Rajagopal sir has extensively worked, because I had been knowing him since last, I think 2004. I know sir, and he has been extremely and extensively involved in making the availability of the opioids. And in 2014, the biggest amendment which has happened in this NDPS Act, the major share and the major work goes to Dr. Rajagopal sir, and he has a big hand in that, loosening the I can say the act, the availability of the opioids. But still, our country, there are many places where opioids are still not available. So, opioid crisis, I can say, is not a biggest thing in our country because we don't get opioids to use. So, the chances of crisis are least comparatively to what has happened in the western part of our country. So, so the first speaker is Dr. Bhagyashree Walinge, who is actually a GMC alumni of Nagpur 1981 batch. And presently, I think she has pursued her MD General Medicine American board at Phoenix, Arizona. And now has been shifted, as I have been shifted to palliative medicine, maybe due to her passion in this specialty. So she has done a fellowship in hospice and palliative medicine in 2021. The same year I have been shifted to palliative medicine. So she's on doing, I think, presently palliative medicine, and her interests are, they're very interesting. So not academic, but the interests are preservation of the Marathi language. I really hats off to you, madam, that preserving our own culture at different places is the biggest thing. And I think you're doing it very well, because I had went to your YouTube Paliversation. I had seen the video also.
Oh, wow.
What you've
Thank
seen,
you.
I went to YouTube and saw what exactly is Paliversation.
Yeah.
And I will follow that, and I will subscribe that channel also. So I
Thank
think
you
it's
so
a
much.
wonderful thing you are doing, because restoring our culture and sticking to our culture is the biggest thing we should do. Okay. So, and I will hand over it to you, madam. So you will be speaking about the opioid crisis.
Yes. Let me share the screen. Hope everybody can see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can see the. Okay. All right. All right. Namaste and good evening to you all. I'm honored to have this opportunity of presenting a webinar on this interesting but grave topic of opioid crisis in presence of the dignitaries like Padma Shri Dr. Rajgopal, who is the founder of Thallium India, Dr. Raghu Thota, the professor and head of the Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai, and Dr. Kiran Gavare, the president of the Indian Society of Anesthesiologists, and the secretary, Dr. Sarita Zogrekar. I know I am preaching to the choir here. I may not be telling you anything new, but please bear with me. And if I do any mistakes, please let me know for sure. I will learn and correct them. The goal of this presentation is to give an overview of the history of opioid use in USA, discuss the circumstances that led to this huge problem, and precautionary measures to be taken by the physician to avoid this disaster again ever in the future. This is a well-known graph from the CDC website. From 1999 to 2019, over a period of 20 years, more than 500,000 people died in USA from an overdose involving any opioid, including prescription and illicit opioids. This rise in opioid overdose deaths can be outlined in 3 distinct waves as depicted in this graph. Now the x-axis, it is showing the years from 1999 onwards, and the y-axis shows the deaths per 100,000 population. And the first wave is in the teal color, or this light blue color. It began with increased prescribing of opioids in 1990s, and why it happened, we are going to see it, with overdose deaths involving prescription opioids. So we are going to dissect this even further to learn a few things so that the history is not repeated. The second wave is the dark blue, began in 2010, and the third wave, and this wave was due to heroin. And the third wave, which is in purple, this wave is jumping into the sky literally, which has caused the opioid crisis. That is due to illicit fentanyl. So heroin and fentanyl, both of them are illicit drugs, and they originated, their root is somewhere in the first wave, the prescription induced opioid epidemic, but now they have taken their own independent life forward. The last two waves, I have the roots in the first one, but in general, opioid crisis is truly a complicated drama of greed and cruelty in the house of capitalism. The hero is the American citizen. The villains, they are numerous, including the politicians, the pharma companies, and the hospital administrators. And folks, as we all know, it's a tragedy. Let's see how this drama has unfolded on the stage of this great country. Though I started with statistics, I'm fully aware of the fact that statistics is medicine without tears. It does not tell you the whole story. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. How well Mark Twain knew the human behavior. Now, why did the first wave happen? We need to know the history in order to understand this. Opium's history in the United States is as old as the nation itself. When morphine was isolated from the resinous gum secreted by the fruits of Papaver somniferum, the poppy plant, in 1803 by a German scientist, and was named after the god of dreams, Morpheus, the medical profession at that time was ecstatic with joy. Physicians believed that opium had finally been perfected and tamed. They did not have a good medication to treat pain effectively at that time, and now morphine had arrived. They saw the light at the end of the tunnel. They did truly see it, but they just didn't know that it was an incoming train. Within no time of the discovery of morphine, legal manufacturing began. It was done by the Merck Company in 1805. And of course, being one of the best commodities in the world, trading and smuggling of morphine also started along with it in the American society and everywhere else in the world within no time. The most appalling affair was that of opiates being sold over the counter. The America that I have seen since the late 80s has been very disciplined, bound by rules and regulations. This is shocking to know that Sears, the departmental store that we visit frequently, which is one of the oldest stores in USA, used to sell a syringe, 2 needles, and 2 vials of bare heroin. Not bare aspirin, folks, listen carefully, bare heroin, all in a handsome carrying case. No kidding about it. No prescription was necessary. Very, very alarming. This shows how naive the medical and lay people were regarding the abuse potential of the opiates. Now, let us see the timeline of some prominent events in the history of morphine use. USA was declared as an independent country from the British rule in 1776, and morphine was discovered about 25 years later. 50 years from that point forward, one of the most important tools in medicine was invented, which was the hypodermic syringe. Doctors could give small doses of morphine, and they used to use the grain per kilogram, something like that. They didn't use the milligram at that time, and they could control pain instantly. And they achieved fame by giving the hypodermic morphine injections. They achieved fame, and the pharma companies, they were put on the pedestal. Take a note of this, pharma companies were put on the pedestal at that time. Eventually, this pedestal was turned into a courtroom. Over a period of few years, the medical profession and the American society had developed enormous enormous trust in the powers of morphine. And then came the war. Here in US, they say that God had created war so that Americans would learn geography. This time, they were trying to learn the geography of their own country. The American Civil War from 1861 to 65 helped set off America's opioid epidemic. US never does anything on a small scale. A simple loaf of bread is quite huge here. The Union Army alone issued nearly 10 million opium pills plus 2.8 million ounces of opium powders and tinctures to its soldiers. Abundance, too much of a good thing. Take a note of this as well, because this habit haunted the country later. So far, this is only about morphine. Heroin and fentanyl hadn't even arrived on the scene yet. Now look at this picture, excuse me. A woman dying of opium overdose. By the way, I've never seen a skinny dog like this in US ever. Now one has to empathize with the physicians of 19th century that they didn't even have aspirin or acetaminophen to treat pain at that time. Acetaminophen was discovered in 1878, but did not come to market until 1950. Aspirin was discovered in 1899 and was marketed in 1915, so 15 years later. They just had laudanum in the beginning, a mixture of the tincture of opium, sugar, and alcohol, and later oral and injectable morphine. Their analgesic ladder that we follow from WHO, their analgesic ladder at that time started and ended with morphine. The doctors were happily prescribing morphine for an array of ailments ranging from menstrual cramps to anxiety disorder to fracture. Mary Todd Lincoln, President Lincoln's wife, took morphine for headaches and became addicted. So the unregulated over-the-counter sales of morphine, sales of syringes to the public, and on top of it, rampant growing of poppy plants by the citizens in their backyard patriotically for the soldiers. By the way, Thomas Jefferson, the president of United States in the first decade of the 19th century, was one of them who grew poppy plant in his backyard. So this all led to an addiction epidemic that affected roughly 1 in 200 Americans by the end of the 19th century. So opioid problem is not new to this country. This is 100 years before the CDC graph we saw earlier. Now, who were the addicts in the late 1800s? The soldiers and upper or middle class white women. A totally different picture than what it is today. Now, how did the American legal system handle this epidemic then? This slide shows the unfolding of the legal thought process in USA until the mid 20th century. This is comparable to other countries like China as well. First, over-the-counter trade was stopped, then prices were increased, then the penalties became harsher, and eventually included death penalty. Then different bureaus were set up for a close watch. Most importantly, FDA was created in 1906, and it took over the control of drugs in 1938. Citizens were prohibited from growing their favorite poppy plants, which were rampantly growing in their backyards by then. The most stringent act was the Narcotic Control Act of 1956. It prescribed heavier penalties, including the death sentence for narcotic offenders. Under this law, I mean, this is really serious. Under this law, doctors were also arrested and imprisoned. It was a draconian drug policy akin to the NDPS Act of 1985 in India that Dr. Rajgopal is going to talk about later. A number of physicians and lawyers opposed the legislation on the ground that the punitive approach has not succeeded in eradicating drug addiction. They proposed and insisted that a better way to control and eventually wipe out the evil is to treat addicts as sick persons and not criminals. This was a complete 180-degree turn from the general thinking process at that time. Finally, this message sunk in. And in 1960s, the Kennedy administration made radical changes in the legal system, returning the power back to the medical community in treating the addicts. This is where one era ends in the history of opioid use in the USA. In the next decade, during the regimes of Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Carter, favorable changes were made for the doctors. The slate was wiped clean. Comprehensive Substance Abuse Act was passed in 1970. Most importantly, this piece of legislation replaced all previous existing federal drug laws. The Schedule of Controlled Substances and DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, they were created. This is what we follow now, and I'm going to talk more about this later. Many laws and acts were being passed in the mid-20th century, but on the socio-political side, the soldiers were returning home after fighting war after war after war. They became a center of attention. Pain of a returning soldier was not just a narrow clinical question, but evolved into a political issue, a new kind of property in the form of social entitlements, as the good writer Keith Wailu has put in his book, Pain, A Political History, a fantastic book to read, by the way. Every palliative care doctor should read this book. The soldiers were human beings after all, not saints. Some understood the system better than the others. The ones who could complain better got the most attention, and the opioid medications as well. Nobody knew if these medications were truly taken for pain control or were just sold on the streets. American Medical Association warned again and again that the disabilities of the soldiers, the disabilities were out of proportion to the injuries. The politicians did not heed this warning and advance their agenda. The liberals continued to fight with the conservatives for another half century on this issue. See how politicians waste our time. And the liberals won the argument. In the arena of the medical practice, the pendulum had shifted towards overcompassion and correcting the undertreatment of pain. In 1996, during his address, the president of the American Pain Society, Dr. James Campbell, introduced the phrase, pain as the fifth vital sign. This was a turning point in the socio-medical arena, a slippery slope rather. Within a few years of this speech, the well-respected organization VA and JACO, the JACO stands for the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations. So this organization controls the hospitals in all over US. VA stands for Veterans Administration. So both of these organizations included this in their national agendas of standards of care, the pain as the fifth vital sign. Rest of the country had to follow this new rule of treating pain as the fifth vital sign, creating a wildfire of unintended consequences. I'm not sure if you followed this in India, but the pain management in the hospital was connected to the financial incentive of the hospital and was added as a question in the patient satisfaction survey, indirectly pressurizing doctors to write more opioid pain medications. Eventually, numerous studies showed that this unidimensional scale is not helping in pain management. It is actually increasing the use and side effects of opiates. So this is the unidirectional scale, the NRS. Finally, 20 years later, in 2016, when opioid crisis was in full force, AMA took action against these initiatives. AMA is the American Medical Association. And by voting to stop treating pain as the fifth vital sign, because it was pouring oil into fire and exacerbated the opioid crisis. What was happening on the pharmaceutical front at that time? Well, it was constantly coming up with new miracle drugs to appease the soldiers, the civilians, and the doctors. During 1928 to 1939, pharma industries helped the scientists produce two very important drugs that we all know about, insulin and penicillin, that changed the landscape of medical practice. The pharma industries were held in high regard. When oxycodone, marketed by the Endopharma, approved by FDA in 1950, bluntly promised to be less addictive than morphine, thus representing a revolution in pain care. People accepted it with warm heart. Production of oxycodone skyrocketed. It was advertised as God's own medicine. But police and legislators regarded it as a devil in disguise. There were congressional hearings about deceptive marketing that played fast and loose with science. During that time, in mid-20th century, there were 250,000 Americans with a drug addiction problem. That was about 1 in 300 Americans. So looking back, this was indeed a prelude to the main event few decades later, which is happening now. But at that time, no firm laws or acts were issued to control the behavior of the pharma industries. So the saga of opioid epidemic continued unhindered. If opioid crisis is considered as a 3-act play, then we are going to review the 3rd act now. The 3rd act began in mid-1990s when the last and the best villain appeared on the stage. It was the decade of Purdue Pharma. It so happened that in mid-1990s, Purdue Pharma was running out of its patent over MS-Contin, which is a long-acting morphine, and it needed to replace it with a lucrative drug. The scientists at Purdue Pharma came up with OxyContin and reported that it lasted for 12 hours. A fantasy indeed. Now, look at these numbers. $200 million spent over marketing. No American company had made such expense over marketing or advertising before this. Nobody has done this aggressive marketing, or nobody had predatory behavior like Purdue Pharma. Of course, in 4 years, Purdue was reaping the benefits of its hard work, and the sales were 1.1 billion. Everything is millions and in billions. And within no time, the OxyContin became the leading drug of abuse. High availability. There were literally millions of pills of OxyContin sent to small villages in Kansas and nearby area in Midwest. And most of the young generation got addicted to it within no time. Now, how did Purdue do that? How did Purdue sell OxyContin? It was a spectacular and exemplary way of doing business, but an immoral and predatory way of carrying out human affairs. We should be aware of this very recent history as medical providers, as a forest ranger should know about the wildfires. We are all human beings who can fall for lures like shining paints, fancy hats, expensive vacations. Purdue played on this human weakness, held all expenses paid symposia at resorts, training more than 5,000 physicians, pharmacists, and nurses. Actually, Purdue studied the medical providers like a microbiologist would study a species of bacteria. Purdue created a marketing database, compiling prescribing profiles of individual physicians, meaning how a doctor would prescribe opioids, whether he or she is going to hesitate or do they prescribe a lot of it, so on and so forth. Though this was done with unethical intentions, this vision must be applauded from business standpoint because it worked. Purdue offered a patient starter coupon program for OxyContin that provided patients with a free, OxyContin is very expensive by the way, free limited time prescription for a 7 to 30 day supply. That's a long period, getting them hooked on to this addictive drug. This kind of behavior from the pharma industries is strictly prohibited in countries like UK, but here in USA, Purdue behaved like a dignified, authorized drug dealer. What were the watchdogs doing at that time? There is one video that was sent to the FDA at that time to get cleared by them, to get approved by them. It was done by Dr. Spanos. And if you listen to it, you will also be convinced that OxyContin is
There's no
not a
question that our best, strongest pain medicines are the opioids, but these are the same drugs that have a reputation for causing addiction and other terrible things. Now, in fact, the rate of addiction amongst pain patients who are treated by doctors is much less than 1%. They don't wear out, they go on working. They do not have serious medical side effects. And so these drugs, which I repeat are our best, strongest pain medications, should be used much more than they are for patients in pain.
Did you listen to him? He's a doctor talking about how good OxyContin is. People, the other doctors, blindly bought it. They just got carried away. This guy is truly lying through his teeth. This video was sent to FDA for approval, but the excuse given was this. What happened was later that year, actually 2 years later, Attorney General's office called FDA saying that, hey, did you review this ominous video? They are lying. And FDA said, we just do not have enough people to review so many thousands of videos and other promotional literature, because we have only 3,500 employees and we have 34,000 applications for approval. I think that they should have just outsourced this project to India. That's what I think. But that was a big mistake done by FDA. FDA was severely criticized by the Attorney General and other powerful entities. One FDA employee famously reported that this kind of mistake is highly visible and has immediate consequences. The media pounces. Yes, they surely did. Some FDA employees got fired, except who were at high positions, of course. Besides, pouncing on FDA, the media dug up the misdeeds of Purdue and other two companies engaged by Purdue, which were McKinsey and Publicis, and received Pulitzer Prize for their pouncing. The public denounces, and surely they did. Purdue was sued right and left by patients and their families. And Congress pronounces, and yes, congressional hearings were held. Purdue pleaded guilty to multiple criminal charges. It was charged, excuse me, $8 billion by the Department of Justice and another $225 million by the civil courts. And Purdue was called morally bankrupt. The Sackler family, the owner of the Purdue company, was called the most evil family of America. In my opinion, the sanctity of medical science was defiled. This pharma company, Purdue, proved that not only love, but money also makes people blind, makes them forget their moral duties. Wrong information regarding the duration of the analgesic effect of OxyContin was used for aggressive marketing. The effect of OxyContin never lasted for 12 hours. It merely lasted for 4 to 6 hours. The risk of addiction was minimized. The doctor in the video says that it's very rare to get OxyContin addiction. The studies have shown that it is as high as 43%. It's extremely serious. And secondly, lastly, the efficacy of OxyContin was comparable to other available opioids, efficacy and safety, but it was glorified as a super painkiller drug. It not only killed pain, but people as well. Yes, after thousands of young people died between the age group of 25 to 54, thorough investigations were done. The lessons learned were these. Most abusers of prescription opioids get their drugs directly from a doctor's prescription or from the prescriptions of friends and family. So a doctor's prescription is the main culprit. Too much availability of the medications and wildly ravaging pharma companies are the other two offenders. Now, this is the insight from a Harvard professor. The current opioid crisis ranks as one of the most devastating public health catastrophes of our time. Words of profound disappointment from the editor of New England Journal of Medicine, Marsha Angel. Over the past 2 decades, the pharmaceutical industry has moved very far from its original high purpose of discovering and producing useful new drugs. And she goes on to saying the gist of it is, but making its way, the Purdue is making its way by bribing everybody right from the guard at the gate to the king at the top. Now, it will be interesting for the doctors outside the US to hear what doctors in USA have to go through. This is about the disapproval and discipline from CDC. And I apologize, this is not a very good slide. As the opioid epidemic continued to worsen in leaps and bounds, in 2016, all the medical providers were sent letters with the new CDC guidelines regarding prescribing opioids. The letter and the guidelines restricting certain over-prescribing practices of opioids, it were many pages long. It is longer than 50 pages. On one of its pages, it was written that these restrictions do not apply to the patients on palliative or hospice care or who have been on opiates for a long time. But many doctors got too scared about the legal consequences and stopped prescribing opioids suddenly. This was actually very annoying and dangerous to a certain degree. The unintended effects of CDC guidelines cause suffering, anxiety, pain crisis. I had an elderly patient with metastatic prostate cancer to bones. He had severe pain, and he was on a lot of oxycodone and long-acting morphine as well. Everything was stopped. He started having nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, all the withdrawal symptoms. He ended up in the ER, and he stayed in the hospital for 3-4 days unnecessarily. So this just happened all over US. And I'm a witness to that. And this should not happen again ever anywhere. CDC sent another letter by highlighting the exceptions to this rule, the new rules. Now, current CDC statistics about the opioid crisis is indeed very sad. Almost 1 million people died due to opioid overdose, which is more than the combined total of all deaths in all US wars from the Revolutionary War in 1775 to the present. This is why the epidemic turned into a crisis when it simply could not be controlled and continued to spread like a wildfire. It is called a weapon of slow mass destruction. In 2017, President Trump officially declared the opioid crisis a public health emergency that we all know about. Now, what are we doing now? The health officials, mainly at CDC, they are fighting the current epidemic on 3 fronts: preventing overdose deaths, helping people recover from addiction, and preventing new addictions. The political parties which aggressively advocated for opioids now are working on getting a budget of $125 billion to be approved by the Congress to build drug rehabs, harm reduction clinics, naloxone kits, so on and so forth. Now, this has become the political agenda. Take a deep breath. This has all been very monstrous and overwhelming. So far, I have told you about the wildfire. Wildfires are scary and will always be there to a certain extent. But it doesn't mean that we should stop using fire altogether for domestic purposes. In spite of this opioid epidemic, we, the doctors in USA, continue to treat pain adequately, effectively, and safely. How do we do that? What are the checks and balances for opioid prescribing? As the prescription of an opioid seems to be the problem, the root of the prescription, how it changes hands, it has been examined and scrutinized. Checks and balances have been placed at each change of hands. Folks, we have come a long way from the days of getting a heroin kit at Sears. So we know that 55% of people, they get a free tablet or here and there, or maybe a complete bottle of Percocet or oxycodone from their friends or relatives, 20% get from their doctor directly, legally, officially. 10% actually pay their friends or relatives to buy opiates, and some get them from the streets, so on and so forth. But in order to control it, these are the checks and balances. The first thing is the prescription should have a DEA number. So DEA stands for Drug Enforcement Administration, as stated before. It was created in 1970, and this is my DEA certificate. It gives me permission to prescribe the drugs from schedules 2 to 5, except, what are the schedules? Let me show you the other slide. The schedule of substances is as follows. Schedule 1 has illicit drugs only, so no prescription for that, of course. Schedule 2, our dear darling opioids fall into that. And tramadol, as you see, it is an opioid as well, but the abusive potential is thought to be much less. So it is having fun with the sedatives in Schedule 4. Though tramadol has been implicated in drug trafficking a lot lately, especially the drug trafficking from India to USA. And the cough suppressants with codeine, which is also actually quite addictive, it falls into the last category of Schedule 5. Based on this schedule, the legal actions or punishments and penalties are placed or issued. Now, the next slide is the most important tool in medicine these days. This is a wonderful invention by the officials that gives us confidence in writing an opioid prescription. We can check, so this is a program in the computer, and we can put in patient's date of birth and information, and we can check if patient has received any prescriptions from another provider within last few months, and what medications and how many pills were ordered, so that we don't end up writing another prescriptions for opiate, because if we do that, most likely those drugs will go onto the street, patient most likely will sell them, so on and so forth. This database also tells the state government about the prescribing practices of a medical provider. So this is also very important. So the government is keeping a watch not only on the patients, but on the doctors as well, which is a good thing. Now, a lot has been talked about how doctors don't know about the substance use disorder, okay? Provider opioid knowledge deficit, it has been talked about a lot in the literature. All this emphasizes is this slide, it just tells us that we as the medical professionals, we have to be medical students all of our life, and that we are. It says that doctors don't understand what addiction is, who is at risk, what is the prescription versus non-prescription opioid addiction, and they believe that the addiction and dependence are synonymous. The belief that opioid addiction is a psychological problem instead of related to chronic painful disease. So this is again, as I said before, just a 180-degree turn to look at the same problem from a different angle. Now, let us talk about all those things. So the conditions associated with opioid use, TAPs, and again, I'm preaching to the choir, you know it more than I do. The TAPs stands for tolerance, addiction, physical dependence, and pseudo addiction. The easiest condition that we can understand is the physical dependence. So when CDC wrote the guidelines and patients had withdrawal, they ended up in the ER because they were dependent on these medications. So this is akin to insulin dependent diabetes. So suppose a patient with type 1 diabetes forgets to take his insulin, he goes into DKA, and that is life-threatening, but the opiate withdrawal is not life-threatening, but it surely feels like that, especially to frail elderly people, and they can end up in the ER or can have even more further adverse events. So we need to be careful about this, and we need to know about this. This is a physiological matter. This cannot be faked. This is not about addiction or substance use disorder. So every patient who has taken opioids for a long period of time, they all become physically dependent on that medication. Tolerance. tolerance is a tricky area where we can make mistakes. We can either overread it or underread it. So if a patient has taken opiates for a little while, so the patient comes to your office, you give, and we are going to talk about it, the substance use screen. He's a good patient. We are going to treat him with pain medication. We give opiates. He's doing well for a little while, maybe 2-3 weeks. And then he says, doctor, I'm just waking up in pain, or while I'm working, I have pain, and it is just not controlled. And at that time, the doctor may feel that, oh, is he having craving? Is he having addiction? Is he having substance use disorder? Should I give him more, or should I not give him any? Should I just stop, taper down? All these thoughts may come, but we need to sit down and ask about all these symptoms. So tolerance is physiological, and the addiction or the opiate use disorder, this is pathological. This is a disease. So when patient has the disorder or the disease, patient has a lot of craving, and you can remember this acronym ABCD. Now, when we say ABCD here, it means to us is America born confident disease. So, but here the I stands for loss of insight. A stands for patient simply cannot abstain from this medication ever, and they have totally impaired behavior. They have severe craving. The cravings, it will make them even kill a person or do prostitution to get drugs. And their emotional responses are totally dysfunctional. So we have to differentiate this from tolerance. And the last one is pseudo addiction. This is not a disease. This is not a disorder. This is what we create. So suppose I give patient who is having severe pain, oxycodone 2.5 milligram Q8 PRN or SOS, as you say that. Yeah, maybe the pain will come down from severe to moderate for a little while. It's such a minimum dose, and maybe nothing will happen. After an hour or a couple of hours, patient will say that I need more pain medication. And at that time, if the nurse is calling you, and if she has a tendency to say that, you know, this patient is a drug seeker, and that kind of makes you think that, oh, am I doing something wrong by giving this patient more medication? No, you are not treating the pain completely adequately. So you have to completely treat the pain so that patient is not hyper vigilant and just in writhing in pain and watching the clock saying that, oh, when am I going to get my next dose? So you have to differentiate all these conditions separately. And pseudo addiction is an iatrogenic syndrome that mimics addiction, but is driven by uncontrolled pain, leading to drug seeking behavior. Constant fear of being in pain, hypervigilance usually resolves once you control the pain. Okay. What is substance use disorder? So this we need to know really well. It is a serious biopsychosocial. So it's not only a social derangement issue, and it's not only a psychological issue like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. No, it has a biological root to it. It is happening because something is wrong with the biology, and it has a strong genetic basis, and that's why we take the family history. And like any other chronic disease, SUD often involves cycles of relapse and remission. And without treatment or engagement in recovery activities, if you don't send this patient to a rehab, it is usually progressive, and it can result in disability or premature death. Usually they suffer such bad social consequences that they become homeless, they lose their jobs, they have a lot of diseases, they are prone to getting HIV infections. I have seen all this in younger patients. So the lifetime prevalence of addictive disorders has been estimated at 3 to 16% of the general population. We should know that. Now, pardon me for this busy slide, but I will tell you what it is. This is the screen my colleagues use in their clinic. I have never practiced in a clinic situation. I have always practiced in the hospital. So I called them and asked them, so how do you screen for SUD? And they said, this is the screen we use. Now there are 5 questions here, and the second question and third question, the second one is for a male patient, and third one is for the female patient. And I thought it was quite funny. It's like, when, you know, Newton had made 2 doors for his cats. One was for the other cat and the other one was for the kitten, and both of them came through the same door. So it says that in the past 12 months, how often have you had uh, uh, four or more drinks, alcoholic drinks? Can you hear me? One standard drink is about one small glass of wine, that is 5 ounce, one beer, or one single shot of liquor. And this is for women where it says 4 ounce, and for 5 ounce, or sorry, the 4 or more glasses. And here it says 5 or more drinks. So this is for male. But other than that, this also has the acronym TAPS, but it stands for tobacco, alcohol, prescription medications, and other substances. So it starts with tobacco, then alcohol, and it goes on to marijuana, cocaine. And the last one is about opiates, and it asks whether you ever had a prescription for opiates. Did you take opiates more than prescribed, or did you use somebody else's prescription medications, so on and so forth. Some of the SUD screens are so long, they have like two or three pages because they include the family history as well. You may have it separately. This family history or social history is very difficult to ask because nobody is going to tell you that they are associated with gangs or that they are being bullied and things like that, unless you're talking to a child who is there most of the time honest. But that usually I have taken care of patients about 60 years of age, and none of this comes to the surface. Who is going to ask adverse childhood experiences and things like that? But this can be done by a nurse or a social worker, or we can just send the questionnaire to patient before patient shows up in the clinic. The next slide is very important. I love this progress note. It is an excellent way of documenting the present history, which is here, and the intended effects of pain medications and the side effects and behavior pointing towards potential abuse. This is very important. And instead of just talking to the patient at that time and forgetting to write it in the chart, we have to document it then and there. And this is an objective way of documenting patient's condition and physician's thought as well. So on the last page here, it asks you, do you think that patient's pain is well controlled? Do you think that patient is having side effects, so on and so forth? So this is an excellent way of documenting. And this is better than just having a numerical score for the pain. Now this one, Dr. Vyavhare had asked me an opioid or agreement. I had asked my colleagues, do they use the opioid agreement in their clinics? And mainly to the primary care physicians I have asked. And yes, they do. This is a 5-page long opioid agreement. And what it is on the first page, it tells the patient that what opioids are and what they can do. These are all good effects of opioids, and they will be able to go back to work if the pain is controlled, so on and so forth. So this is the education about their pain and the good effects of opioids. Second page is the long-term effects of opioids and side effects of opioids, bad effects of opioids. And this is very important because sometimes we forget such effects. Everybody remembers about constipation and nausea, vomiting, and having sedation, but long-term use includes low testosterone levels, especially this is very important in young patients, infertility, impotence, and in all of the patients, the opioids make the mouth very dry, causing tooth decay, and most importantly, in any patient, at least in US, interaction with alcohol is very important and should be underlined. The fourth page, this one, the patient is asked to be loyal to this agreement, and the fifth page is the signature page. There is no witness here. There's only the prescriber and the patient, but you can add a witness line here and get the nurse to sign it, something like that. But this is a very important document. It has no role in hospice care, and even in palliative care, it doesn't have a role. But if you're going to treat chronic pain, you should have this document signed and go over it some people do it every 3 months. There are paranoid doctors. Some people do it every 6 months. Some people do it every yearly. So it is your choice. Now, I couldn't resist the temptation of showing you this slide. This is from the movie, The Good Earth. This is a scene from that movie where Paul Muni played Wong Lung and Louis Renner played O Lan. Those are white actors playing the role of Chinese people. And this is my most favorite novel by Pearl S. Buck, a Nobel Prize winning writer. And in this scene, what he's saying, Wong Lung, a poor Chinese farmer, is asking his wife, Olan, who had worked in the rich Wang family, Wang dynasty's big house. And he asks her, did you find out why they are poorer these days? And Olan says, I had a moment for a private talk with their cook. She said, this house cannot stand forever with the old mistress eating enough opium every day to fill 2 shoes with gold. Eating enough opium every day. So as you must know, China fought and was defeated sourly by the Britishers and the other Europeans in 2 opium wars in late 1800s, imposing the opium trade on China, giving rise to a big epidemic in that country. They are still dealing with the opioid problems. We can learn from other countries as well. US is not the only country who is dealing with the opioid epidemic, but the crisis is only in the US because the numbers are astronomical. In the European countries, the attitude towards pain and pain medication is different. They have strict policies and no political baggage. The politicians don't interfere with medical business. China, it has liberalized opium farming these days. In say 100 years ago, one of their kings had prohibited opium farming totally. And now they're coming back to it. They have methadone clinics like we have in US. They have traditional methods of pain treatment as well, which includes, most importantly, acupuncture that is available in US as well these days. And they also use herbal medications for pain control. Now in Germany, they are much more conservative in writing opiate prescriptions. So they have a think twice policy. And Germany and UK both, they have harm reduction clinics. I don't know if you know about this and don't know if India has them. Harm reduction clinics are the places where the people who use IV drugs or they snort them, the illicit drugs, however they use it, they go to these places and these places give them alcohol swabs, clean syringes, clean needles, and whatever paraphernalia they need. And they ask them to use the drugs in front of the people who are knowledgeable about the bad effects of these drugs. And they use them. This becomes a captive audience. They try to teach them about these medications, how bad they are for the health. And if the patient or the person has the ill effect, like they have respiratory depression from fentanyl, then they resuscitate them then and there and then send them to the hospital. So they are trying to reduce the number of deaths from opioids, basically. Then the naloxone availability is very important. I was discharging a patient from the VA hospital one day. The patient was going home on hospice. I thought he was not even going to last for a week. The pharmacist came with the naloxone kit. And I said, why are you giving it to this patient? I was so afraid that the wife will give it to the husband who was dying. And he said, no, if somebody else in the house takes this morphine and has respiratory suppression, then they should know what to do. And that's what the naloxone is for. So I think that was a very good idea. And the addiction treatment rehabs, Germany and UK have lots of them. We are trying to get them, as I told you, the Congress women and the senators, they are working on having lots of addiction treatment rehabs. I have discharged patients with addiction to nowhere because we didn't have a rehab to accept them. That's a very bad feeling when you do that. Patients go to home or go back to streets. and continue to be addicted to these drugs. The most important thing that is in UK and the US needs to follow is the strict regulation of pharma industries, and we talked enough about it. This is a very heartwarming story of well-placed compassion. And Rwanda, this is in Central Africa. This small country has done wonders with the use of morphine, and it's very exemplary. What they're doing is the government of Rwanda has taken the initiative to ease the suffering of the terminally ill by distributing morphine completely free of charge without the involvement of the pharmaceutical company. And I think so many countries can follow in suit for this particular initiative. And Dr. Raj Gopal, I'm so indebted to him in knowing so many things. He told me that actually it was not Rwanda, but it was started in, I believe, Uganda. And he also gave me the name of the person who is involved in it. Please read this, and this is, you will feel very good that how people are doing good work, and when the opioid epidemic is going on in USA. Now the final slide is lessons learned from the opioid crisis. Last but one slide. I'm not going to read all the points. The most important point is avoid pharma companies entering your clinic or hospitals. Do not let them teach you pharmacology. Do not let them tell you how to manage your pain patients. And just do not let them just overshadow your work and make you blind to your duties. The politician, never let a politicians make agenda of a medical issue, and do not be over compassionate, always be objective. And the most important point is never forget our duty to treat and prevent healthcare related pain and suffering. I hope I have made myself clear about how the opioid crisis is, why it happened, and the difference between the wildfire and the domestic fire, basically. So do not let the opioid crisis deter you from taking care of your patients. And let me end with a quote from Shakespeare. In King Lear, there is a conversation between a courtier and the king. And King Lear says, the courtier says, "Sire, let me kiss thy hand." And King Lear says, "Let me wash them, the smell of mortality." Only Shakespeare can write like that. We all have that smell of mortality around us. Let us change it into a perfume by treating the suffering. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the opportunity. I will stop sharing now.
Wonderful, Dr. Bhagyashree. It was so wonderful. You started from the ancient days, how the opium was produced, how it came into the existence, right from, I think, the existence of USA till what crisis, economic crisis it went into opioid crisis. So all things you very well covered. The availability of this opium at, I can say, the Kirana shop, like the Sears. It's a sort of Kirana shop.
Literally, yeah.
Yes. So it's really thing. So now coming to the point, so you very well made aware us about how the opioids were available. So because see now we come from a background of anesthesia, and in anesthesia also the use of opioids is a very short term use, around 5 days or 7 days. But even then there was a lot of opioid crisis in the anesthesia background because the patients were discharged with opioids. So that was another point which led to an opioid epidemic actually in the USA, and American Society of Anesthesiologists had come with strict warnings of not doing that prescriptions, because even for hernia surgeries, patients were prescribed the Purdue, especially the oxycodone.
Yes.
So that was a major culprit for an opioid epidemic. And as you see, most of our practices are influenced by the Western literature, and there was a lot of I can say a dilemma in our practitioners, anesthesia practitioners in India, whether to really use opioids in our practices or not. But coming to the point that opioid in itself are in availability crisis, I can say, in India.
Yes. other.
Even in Mumbai, a place like Mumbai, there are certain institutes where there is free availability of opioids. There are
Yeah.
certain institutes there are opioids are not
Nothing.
free available.
Yeah.
So we are, I think, far away from reaching that point of opioid crisis. But the literature and the opioid crisis of the United States of America has really warned us about
Yes.
to take strict precautionary measures.
Yes.
That we should not go into that. So that's why these histories are very important, so that we should not
Yes.
repeat all those things.
Yes.
So a wonderful way of presentation. I'm totally impressed because the way you presented it means I had seen for the first time. I heard many talks about opioid crisis, but this was a very I can say niche and proper way you presented it.
Thank you
And
so
how
much.
it happened it. So thank you very much for that presentation. And from here we move on to I think any questions to be taken over here, or we should continue with our next talk.
I think we
Dr.
can do
Kiran.
it at the end of the session.
Yeah. Yes.
So then we will go to our next speaker. I think sir
Yes.
does not need any introduction, because I can say he's the father figure of palliative care medicine in our country, India, I can say. And he has established the first palliative care services in Kerala. And we, in our palliative care community, we follow that model. We call it as a Kerala palliative care model. And it really gives us so much of insights how to reach at the root level and give our medical services in the way of pharmacology, in the way of empathy, sympathy, everything, which we give at tertiary level. But sir has really taught us, and he has really opened up channels. And if you go and visit sir's website, Pallium India website, there are various nodal presents. If you see Indian map is there, and you click any district, not this, the state, you will get the availability of palliative care services. Because in Tata Hospital, patients come way far away from the places, and they go back to their native hometown, and we don't know where to liaison them with the palliative care services. And Pallium India has really been helpful for us
Yes.
and all our practitioners. So thank you very much, sir, for that wonderful initiative also. So, sir, coming to the introduction of sir, sir is the recipient of Padma Shri, the fourth highest civilian award, which is given by our country. So that's a very magnanimous achievement for any doctor, and especially in the field of palliative medicine, I can say. And he's the founder, and I can say the chairman of Pallium India. And Pallium India has a collaboration with WHO, World Health Organization. And there are many other things, but I think achievement of Padma Shri is the biggest thing over of all the achievements sir has done. And second is the Pallium India. So sir will be speaking about the use of morphine in palliative care. So over to you, sir.
May I speak for a second?
Yeah.
I want to complete his introduction by saying that
Please.
he was nominated for the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, sir, congratulations.
Yes, yes. So that is, I feel so proud of being an Indian whenever I say that, whenever I remember. So congratulations, Dr. Rajgopal, and to all of us that he was reached there. But thank you, thank you. I will let Dr. Rajgopal speak.
Yes, over to you, sir.
Dr. Tota, thank you for the very kind words and for the build-up. Bhagishree, when you showed me the presentation, honestly, I learned such a lot about the history of the calamity in the USA, both the positives and the negatives. And that makes my job easier. I am quite aware that we are already at 9:11 p.m. I'll try to be as brief as possible, but nevertheless, make the important points that I have to. You heard mostly one part of the story, the crisis, opioid overuse crisis. Let us be aware of these two unfortunate situations. So many with substance use disorder in the world, and 61 million seen serious health-related suffering. If you talk about our own country, we don't have data for substance use disorder, reliable data for our country. But we know that at least 10 million Indians are in unrelieved pain. And by no means is that a small number. So maybe we should consider both in our country. We do not want either crisis. This is the so-called principle of balance, our dual responsibility. Kiran, Raghu, and I, we all have these two responsibilities. As members of the medical profession, prevent inappropriate and non-medical use at the same time, ensuring access to opioids for people in pain, because science has not found another way of treating at least 2/3 of people with cancer and some other kinds of pain. This we have the global convention of 61, the single convention, already had put it very clearly in the preamble that medical use of narcotic drugs continues to be indispensable for the relief of pain and suffering. And it was true in 1961, and now in 2022, it is still true. And therefore, adequate provision must be made to ensure the availability of narcotic drugs for such purposes. However, the balance is not right. Addiction is very visible. People in pain are crouched under their beds or within four walls and are not visible. The public health field has generally favored the prevention so much that availability for medical use has suffered. This interesting figure was brought out by Lancet Commission report of 2017, where each continent is represented in terms of opioid use. See the abnormally obese North America and Australia, and see the emaciated India. This represents the way opioids are being used. Now, where is the voice of reason? Western Europe is more or less normal in size. This is where they have achieved the principle of balance, where for more than 4 decades, enough controls have been placed to prevent significant abuse. Maybe it is bad in Germany, but in most of Western Europe, certainly in UK, the balance is achieved, showing us that the balance indeed can be achieved. And it's not only in affluent countries, even in Uganda, it is prescribed by nurses in Uganda, and still they have managed to keep in enough restrictions to prevent abuse. It is not sold out through the pharmacies. However, in India, the balance, as I said, was very much shifted. It took 19 years of efforts, but finally in 2014, the draconian NDPS Act was amended. What does that mean? I'll be very brief about this. What it means is, till 2014, every institution needed these multiple licenses and permits. 4 of them in Kerala. I mean, it was varying from state to state. Each state had a different role. To issue them, multiple agencies, including excise, drug control, Directorate of Health Services, they were all involved. Licenses had short validity. So by the time somebody has a possession license and gets an import permit, and then the manufacturer gets an import permit, this would have expired validity. You cannot receive the medicines. And this is what has been changed with the amendments. Now, all states have the same rules. States cannot make their own rules anymore. That's for so-called essential narcotic drugs, there is a single window. Whether it's for Punjab, Kerala, or Maharashtra, only the state drug control is involved in the process. You don't have to go to multiple offices. One. And in every state, so-called recognized medical institutions, RMI, approved by the state drug controller, do not need licenses. I have left this presentation with Kiran so that she can share it with all the participants later on. So this is the essence. Only problem is all states have not implemented it. Wherever it's implemented, all states have the same rules. Only state drug control is involved. You don't have to go to excise or anybody else. And RMIs do not need any license. Once the drug controller says that Dr. Dekhu's institution is an RMI, that's it. The institution can procure the medicine. Only thing is, all the documentation will have to be kept. Now, just to clarify the difference between a law or act and rules, the law is something that is passed by the parliament. Rules are created by executive order. So by the 2015 rules, among the drugs that we use, we are concerned with morphine, fentanyl, and methadone are named essential narcotic drugs. So a RMI can get by all these without any other licenses from the manufacturer. But the institution will have to become an RMI to stock and dispense. Is that clear, or do you want any clarification about this? Or we can ask questions later, as Kiran said. Now, the only catch is, to become an RMI, the institution must have at least one doctor, MBBS or BDS, with training in pain management. The rule does not say what that training is. If the drug controller of the state approves it, that's okay. And in 2020, once the pandemic came in, the Kerala Drugs Controller has approved of online training as adequate. An online course in pain management is enough for the doctor to stock and dispense of opioids, essential narcotic drugs in that RMI. And government hospitals do not even need to apply. They are all deemed to be RMIs. But they also must make the ensure all documentation and annual consumption data have to be provided by drugs controller. All RMIs, whether deemed RMIs in the government or other approved RMIs on the private sector or charitable sector, they all have to give annual consumption data to the drugs control. This is how we keep the records. All receipts are entered in red. The patient's number is the serial number, the date, opening stock, name of the patient, patient's identity number in the registration, quantity dispensed, and closing stock. And in the final column, the doctor in charge puts in the signature. This is vitally important because you are running on a hot coal. If this fails, and if the pharmacy has loose practices, we are asking for trouble. This is something that Bhagyashree was also mentioning. In that balance, the proper documentation and stipulations are necessary. This is not too complicated. We easily manage to do this everything. In our tiny state of Kerala, which has only 1% of India's land, more than 600 RMIs stock and dispense essential narcotics. Low-cost morphine is available in Kerala. One tablet of 10 milligram costs about ₹1.25. The access to oral morphine in Kerala is 16 times the national average. Okay, but that's not something for us to brag about. The problem is, even now, I told you that UK is sort of ideal balance. This is only about 1 in 150 of what is considered ideal. So Kerala is not doing well. It's only doing slightly better than the rest of the country. But the factors that helped in Kerala was public awareness. Hence, Bhagishree, your video series becomes vitally important as a tool of public knowledge and professional education. And of course, in Kerala, there was a state palliative care policy which was facilitatory. What limits it even now is limited professional education. That is something that we need to attend to much better. And anyway, of course, I hope you all know that from 2019, medical students who join the course has modern pain management as part of the curriculum. So the future is not very bleak. So this balance is what we need, for which to achieve the balance, professional education, public awareness, and implementation of the existing rules in all the states are what are required. Our regional coordinators go through state after state, working with drug controllers and with national health mission to make this happen. But remember, it's not only a question of legal barriers. The problem is not visible. Doctors are afraid. There is severe opiophobia, unrealistic fear of addiction. The opposite of what Bhagishree explained in USA. Societal acceptance is a problem. Oh, morphine, that's what people will say. And of course, the legal barriers are still there because all states have not implemented the new rules. And Bhagyashree's video campaign and advocacy to engage the community is, I believe, the agent for change for the future. And I leave you with that message. We should not be pro-opioid or anti-opioid. It's balance. We should be pro-patients, anti-suffering. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Yeah. So
Can I ask you one
yeah,
question? Dr. Rajgopal, our country is too big and densely populated. So is it possible to replicate the efforts done in Rwanda, or we are far away from it, away in the sense that we have crossed that milestone and we are doing better than that?
No, Bhagyashree, one of our problems, you mentioned it already. Our country is too vast.
Yeah.
So health is a state subject. Drug control is a state subject. Parliament passes the laws. The implementation becomes necessary by the state governments. Right. So that's why we have to work state by state to make the implementation happen. And as you know, some states, like we call them Bimaru states, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, etc., have an additional problem about the governance and management. So some states do better, some states do worse. And border states are very difficult because sensitivities are very high about drug trafficking. You go and talk about morphine in Punjab and the public fear is very.
I see. Thank you.
I have one question. Like Dr. Bhagyashree has said that they have the consent form and everything there. So do we have a similar type? Like we do have, but I just wanted to know whether like before starting morphine, do we need to make them sign that consent form?
Kiran, an absolute no, we don't. Okay. That is US following the crisis. Here, we do not do this. Morphine, in a way, is a life-saving medicine. It's for a heart attack. Will you get a special consent for administering morphine? So here is a deemed consent. I mean, that is not common practice, not only in India, in Western Europe also. You don't.
Right. Okay. Like we are prescribing morphine, yes, left and right, but so like only for palliative or malignant patients.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just a little worried whether there are some medical legal issues if something
No.
goes wrong somewhere. So
Kiran,
that's why I was asking.
in most states in India, morphine is not sold through pharmacies.
I
The
see.
big problem occurs when it is sold widely through pharmacies, as in USA. So here it is mostly through recognized medical institutions, hospitals,
Yes.
and only in some states, say in whole of Delhi, only about 3 pharmacies are allowed to sell morphine. So that itself becomes a check and balance.
Yes. Okay.
Dr. Sunitha asks, which non-cancer conditions do you advise morphine and in what doses? So the dose of morphine is generally titrated to the degree of pain. Let me give you an example. Suppose somebody has a peripheral vascular disease, which generally is a worse pain than than cancer. And in such cases, if a severe pain will not respond to other medications, morphine can be used. The condition is less relevant. The thing is, as the American Pain Society and other organizations have laid down conditions, in non-cancer conditions, morphine should not be a first-line drug or any opioid. Not first line. That doesn't mean that it can never be given. If it cannot be, it should be a second or third line medicine. So when I use it for somebody with a non-cancer condition, we have to be a bit more careful in the sense, if the person is going to have it for 5 years, chance of addiction understandably is more. Then we take some precautions, like clear explanations to the patient and family, never permitting non-sanctioned dose escalations, periodic reviews, etc. We cannot afford to do urine opioid measurement like in USA, but this is usually enough.
May I add something to this question and answer what I was thinking about when I read this question? It's not only for pain we use opioids, we also use it for severe shortness of breath associated with terminal lung diseases, COPD, pulmonary fibrosis, and things like that. And also for conditions like ALS, multiple sclerosis, and a lot of diseases where people can eventually get bed bound and they stay in pain and things like that. So I just want to make it a point that other than cancer and non-cancer pain, there are other symptoms, especially shortness of breath, the morphine is used for. Thank you.
Bhagishree, as in my, long back, when I attended my MD exam, I was asked, tell me one contraindication for morphine.
I know.
It said dyspnea, and that was correct. Today, morphine becomes a drug of choice for conditions like COPD, interstitial lung disease.
Yes.
So that paradigm shift has happened. And I'm so glad that my own teacher in medicine for the last month could get away without oxygen and have a reasonable quality of life on 2.5 milligrams of morphine 4 times a day. So thank you, Dr. Sri, for breathlessness. That is very valuable. Dr. Vidya, yes, a very clear yes. If the patient cannot come by himself or herself, how can a person with advanced cancer travel to a hospital? We allow families to come. Only thing is, we will still ask the right questions and we will issue it to the family member. Same documentation. There is no law against it. That is quite permissible. But we ask the right questions.
So here I wanted to ask one question, about this proxy, because we get a lot of proxy patients, proxy visits by the patient attendants because of the advanced illnesses. So we do give prescriptions, but after the third visit, we ideally ask for a local GP, not the prescription, saying that at least the patient is alive and all these things, because we are a bit concerned about the opioid diversions in this case. So do you follow the same practice, sir?
Dr. Tota, here we usually manage with a video call if we have any doubts. or
Yeah.
a phone call, talk to the patient directly, or if the patient is unable to speak, get everybody on a video call. At least in Kerala, I mean, almost everybody can access a smartphone, and that's
Yes,
not
yes.
a big issue.
Yeah.
But some caution is necessary, no doubt about it. If you have any other red flags, some doubt that there is foul play, somehow we will cross-check.
Can I
And,
ask something about this? Sorry.
So
Go
maximum, sir, maximum prescriptions, how many tablets per prescriptions? Because we give only 100. Our institute has given permission, said that not more than 100 tablets per prescription.
Dr. Thota, the law or the rules do not specify the quantity to be dispensed. But we, in our organization, it is not by number of tablets, because if somebody is taking, we have only 10 milligram tablet and taking 20 milligrams for hourly, it is enough only for about a week. We usually give enough supply for 2 weeks at a time. And if the patient is coming from far away, we may give up to a month, but after 2 weeks, cross-check with the family by phone. But law doesn't specify the quantity to be dispensed.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Sunita has the problem that many times patients' relatives ask for more than a month's supply. We can understand that. We can understand that sometimes people have to travel so far, 400 and 600 kilometers to access morphine. I can understand that, but that doesn't mean that I will give it. 1 month is the absolute maximum that we give it. Ordinarily, it's 2 weeks, but if they are coming from very far away, we make it a month.
Can I make a point here? In US, when we discharge patient home after a surgery or something for acute pain, we are supposed to write a prescription for 3 to 7 days. I always write for 3 days, and if it is a weekend, 4 days, something like that. But people, I have come across people, they used to write 84 tablets of Percocet for a simple person who had a cardiac cath done or something like that. It was all because of that pain as the fifth vital sign. And I usually write, I'm very stingy about it, 6 to 10 tablets. 10 is like killing me. I'm awake all night that, oh my God, I wrote 10 Percocet tablets. But for cancer pain, I usually write for 2 weeks for a legitimate pain, and then they should follow up with the primary care physician. Unless they are already on hospice, hospice will be 1 month supply. And they send a nurse, and this is what I was going to ask you. Do you have home health care or nurses who can go and check on them and have an objective opinion of what is going on inside that house? Does that happen?
Bhagishree, in Kerala, we have a palliative care nurse visiting veteran patients in the government sector once a month.
I see.
Do you ever see it happening in the next 10 years all over the country with the kind of healthcare we have? It's not possible. But really, I believe, with the whole country being more or less well connected by telephone, I think we have a system for follow-up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So I would just like to share one interesting case. One PNC patient was admitted with us. She had a 10-month-old baby, and she had come from US, and she was taking hydromorphone for a long time for her sickle cell problem. She had sickle cell disease, and she had landed up in crisis because of dengue recently, and she was admitted with us. So even after steroids and everything we tried, even after she came out of that crisis, she just wanted morphine. We were not sure whether it was she was trying to or whether she was an addict or she was trying to. So we tried fentanyl, we tried everything. Then ultimately she was taking around 5 milligram of IV morphine 3 times a day. So it was so difficult for us to manage, and I just didn't know how to manage her. So that was the reason why I thought, what exactly is happening in US? why it is going into crisis. Like all sickle cell disease patients are getting hydromorphone there.
Yes, we do. I think it's a legitimate case for severe chronic pain that cannot be controlled by acetaminophen or aspirin. So we do give it to them. So I will let Dr. Rajgopal say more
Yes.
about this. Yeah.
No, I agree, Dr. Kiran. When somebody does need morphine like that, we would give it. But when it's a non-cancer patient, there are clear instructions. If you come back and tell me after 5 days that the tablets have been stolen or lost or something, we
Yeah.
cannot give you.
Mm.
You cannot increase the dose by yourself. No unsanctioned dose escalations. With that agreement, we will have to issue.
Mm.
I think a sickle cell, especially when they go into crisis, the pain is agonizing and they do need opioids at that time.
Right. So I think no more questions. No? Wonderful discussion.
Yes, it was very good.
Great presentation.
I hope my, and I not hope, I think my presentation was too long and I apologize for that. I must have crossed the line there.
No, it was wonderful, really, and both the presentations excellent, and the way it went and steered, and even the discussions were up to the point. So I hand it over to Dr. Kiran, so to give the vote of
Thank you.
thanks.
Yes. Yeah. So we go for the vote of thanks directly.
Yeah.
All my respected senior and Dr. Rajgopal sir, Dr. Bhageshri madam, and Dr. Raghu sir. Excellent presentation and moderation by sir also. And though right now we are not in a phase of opioid crisis, but this particular presentation by Dr. Bhageshri has alerted us for the methodical use of the morphine in our even cancer pair management and non-cancer patient, a limited use. As Dr. Rajgopal sir is practically doing so much of field work and his experiences have boosted up tremendously for the management with the doses of morphine. So I wish to thank from ISA NCP everyone for giving your precious time for today's presentations. And I would like to have further communications further in near future if we have any more chances of meeting on the same floor with the different sessions on the particular topic. It will be excellent. So I would like to convey my sincere thanks. I think Dr. Saurabh, the GC member Saurabh Burde and Sheetal has also joined. Thank you, Dr. Saurabh and Dr. Sheetal, and all my senior members and all the delegates who have patiently waited till long. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir, Rajgopal sir and Raghu Thota sir, very much. And of course, Dr. Bhageshri, thank you so much.
Thank
It
you.
was a
Thank you.
wonderful session. Yeah.
Thank you everyone.
Please take care.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr.
You
Good
take
night.
care, sir. Good
Thank
night.
you.
See you all again.
Kiran, you are always with a bright smile, even at 9:40 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Raghu.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.